This is the Gambia Police Force Civil Society Advocacy on Human Rights program. It is part of a broader program called the Police Program Africa, a joint German-EU support to the police force. Some time back, the EU and the federal government of Germany commissioned the German Society for International Cooperation Limited to provide assistance to the Gambia. And helping in security is one of their remit. It's one of their projects that they are contributing to Africa. And in fact, this program is being implemented in 9 other countries on the continent. Today, on this panel, I've got 4 gentlemen, and later on we'll be joined by a 5th. On my right here, I've got representatives from the police. I've got the police PRO, Mr. Lamin Jai, and the Assistant Superintendent of Police, I think Mr. Ensasar. And here on my left, I have Mr. Boubacar Sambu, President of PAC, Peace Ambassadors Gambia. And on his left, I have Mr. Abdou Bojang, GIZ Police Advisor. And GIZ here, just to let people know, it is a German Society for International Cooperation. It is known for GIZ, in short, in this country, right? Thank you very much. Welcome to this program. We'll go straight into it. Mr. Bojang, what's the rationale to this program? Give us some background.
Thank you very much. Sorry. Thank you very much, Mr. Moj. Good evening to our beautiful listeners out there, and good evening to my colleagues here in the panel. As Mr. Moj rightly mentioned, the GIZ Police Program Africa, joint German-EU support to the Gambia Police Force, came about as a result of some scoping work that was done by GIZ. GIZ is the German Corporation for International Cooperation. GIZ is an acronym, it's a German acronym. The rough English translation is what I just gave you. They did a scoping work sometime in 2018, 2019, and then after that scoping work, the 2 organizations, that is Gambia Police Force and GIZ, came together in October-November 2019 and did an operational planning workshop. In that workshop, the Gambia Police Force and GIZ agreed on result areas that GIZ will support Gambia Police Force on. And some of these result areas has to do with what we are seated here tonight to discuss, supporting Gambia Police Force in public relations, in its public relations work, as well as its community policing approach. That's just a brief background. There's a lot to talk about, but I'll just narrow it down to that. And following on from there, we had a workshop in August 2021 where civil society and Gambia Police Force officers in the workshop agreed on topics of exchange. Sometime last month, 28th and 29th of October to be precise, we had our first exchange between Gambia Police Force and civil society. And in that exchange, we discussed the topic of crime prevention. This is the second such exchange that GIZ would facilitate for Gambia Police Force, and it's also one of the project indicators that our Police Program Africa aims to achieve. The main objective or the rationale behind these exchanges is to foster dialogue between Gambia Police Force on one hand and civil society on the other, because we believe that in a democratic society, there's need for the police and civil society to work together, and there's need for cordial relationships to exist between the police and civil society, because after all is said and done, the police are here to serve the members of the public. So what better way to serve the members of the public than to have dialogue between the police and civil society? And the topic of exchange tonight is a very important topic in that regard.
Thank you very much there. Perhaps I will come to Mr. Sambu. Here we're talking about human rights advocacy, concepts of human rights advocacy. Enlighten us a bit on that aspect. This is human rights advocacy.
All right, thank you very much. Talking about human rights advocacy, we'll first have to understand what human rights are. From general perspective, human rights they will be referred to as the basic rights that everyone has, whoever you are. These are rights that everyone has just because you are a human being. You are born with these rights. They are not given to you by anyone. Rights and freedoms that you were born with because you are a human being. One may want to give examples of these rights. First and foremost, one will first say the right to life, because all other rights come after when there is life first. All the rights end when you die. But the most important and the first that everybody starts with when talking about human rights, the first one is the person has to be alive. And these are rights that are protected by both national and international laws. And we are going along with some freedoms. For example, when we talk about the Chapter 4 of 1997 Constitution, this is where you have fundamental rights and freedoms of all human beings. And it does not discriminate. All human beings who are living in the Gambia, their rights and freedoms are protected in that chapter of the Constitution. Now, apart from the right to life, these laws, both national and international laws, will also guarantee some freedoms. For example, freedom of expression. As human being, you will have your thoughts, and you will want to express these thoughts. Should anybody control how you think? Should anybody control how you express, or when you want to say what you are feeling? Nobody should control those things. So those freedoms and rights are guaranteed by our laws, that every human being have right to these things. You have right to liberty. You have the right to be yourself. And nobody should control you. That as far as you understand who you are matured. For example, when it comes to children, there may be some specific laws. Maybe that will even also be accompanied by maybe parental guidance. But when you are a matured person, this is a person who has the right to liberty. You are free to be yourself. What you want to, the kind of life you want to live in, it's your responsibility to determine, and nobody should control that. In terms of association also, as human, because human beings are social beings, people will want to associate themselves with one group or the other. And these, as human beings, these are rights that are not given to us by anybody. They are rights that we have because we are human beings. And we can choose to belong to any group that we want, and nobody should control this. And this is why, as society, nobody should boast his or her chest to say, I have given you the freedom to express yourself. Nobody gave anybody those freedoms. Those freedoms are given to us by God when we are made human. That is why we are free to think for ourselves. We are free to express what we feel about issues. And we are free to ask questions about things that are happening around us. If we think there is something happening and we don't like it, or somebody does something to you and you don't like it as a human being, you have that freedom to express your feelings about those things. In fact, also exercise your belief. Freedom from slavery and torture will also come, example. So these are also things that nobody should control or cage any human being. Once you are a human being, you are free to move around. You are free to go anywhere you want to go to. Nobody should control those things. So example. So now when we talk about advocacy, this is where the role of civil society comes in. Now the civil society as very important component of the society that helps the police that are responsible for implementation of the enforcement of these laws and protection of the rights. Civil society plays a very important role. One in terms of serving as watchdogs to ensure these rights of people are protected. Sometimes some people responsible who are at control of power may want to sometimes suppress people. But the civil society that are serving as watchdogs watch to make sure they document human rights violations. They play a very important role in documenting human rights violations. But also they propagate recommendations in ensuring these violations are being remedied. That they don't only talk about it, but they come up with recommendations to push governments, to push institutions, to ensure something is being done about the human rights violation. For example, if a particular community is being disadvantaged, or something is done to a community that make them suffer, or that make them not enjoy the freedom and rights that they are supposed to enjoy as human beings, civil society organizations can step in to speak for those people. But courts also can come up with recommendations to authorities as to what should be done for these people to enjoy these rights that they need. So they can help victims also understand what to do if rights are violated. And generally in educating the public, and also engaging the legislation, the National Assembly, for example, for promoting legislation, coming up with laws that will guarantee the protection of all human rights of individuals. So the civil society plays a very important role in ensuring all duty bearers play their responsibility in ensuring the rights that are given to people by God are protected, that nobody takes it from them. Where they don't have the powers, the individuals who are being affected, the civil society use their advocacy skills, their advocacy tools to ensure what should be done is done.
Yes, this is quite interesting here. So here the focus is on their rights, you know, on people's rights and the like. So one was just wondering, is there any such emphasis, as it were, on people's responsibilities, which is a slightly different concept, given human rights, in protecting human rights? Surely there must be people's responsibilities under these? Yeah,
very well. Yeah, every right goes with a responsibility. If you enjoy your rights, that you are, or you know all your rights, this is my right, this is my right, this is my right, it's important to also understand what your responsibilities are. If somebody says you have the right to live, you have right to your life, it is your responsibility to make sure you live in a way, in a manner that will your own life will be safe. You cannot say I have right to life and you want to jump and catch the NAWEC extension wire. That is your responsibility to protect it, because that's a dangerous act. When you do it, you may lose your life in that. It's your responsibility. But when we say also it's a right to express yourself freely without being interrupted by anybody, without being stopped by anybody, it is also your responsibility. You should understand that in that freedom of expressing yourself, you don't have the right to insult anybody. You don't have right to make statements that can cause conflict. You don't have make statements that can put fear or intimidation in the minds of other people. So those things also need to be understood, that every right that anybody has also goes along with the responsibility that you should not forget. That they will always say that where your right stops is where another person's right begins.
Thank you very much. I'll come to the Assistant Superintendent of Police, Mr. Ensar Sarr. This is quite interesting here. The police, you are right in the thick of it, in the sense that you have to enforce the law, yet you have to police that border, not to violate people's human rights.
Exactly. Thank you very much, and I want to say thank you to the German EU Cooperation Support for hosting this program, in trying to bring partnership between the police and the civil society organizations to keep the public informed about the role of the police and the civil society organization. So when it comes to human rights is an important aspect of our life, because we are all human beings and we are all born with rights, and those rights are entrenched in us. So it is not for somebody to come and take those rights away from us. These are rights that these are God-given rights that are given to us as human beings, because simply we are human beings. So to start with, it's important also to give a background of how human rights came about into existence, because you will recall as far back as in 539 BC before Christ, when Cyrus the Great conquered Babylon. And then after conquering Babylon, at that time, a lot of people were being enslaved in that part of the world. And then when he conquered Babylon, the first thing that he did unexpectedly was to free all slaves for everybody to go back home. And then make a declaration that everybody is free to choose your own religion and to go about your life. So it all started from there, coming down the line. You have other countries, the big nations, the Britain, the France, the Soviet Union, the United States, they all came up with their own human rights bills or bills of rights, in ensuring that people have right, people enjoy certain basic freedoms when it comes to lives and livelihoods. So in this whole thing, this whole process, the police plays a very central position because we sit in the center of all these things. We are mandated to preserve law and order in the community. And in doing that, we are the duty bearers. We bear the responsibility of protecting the people, respecting the people's rights. So it is not for us to violate people's rights. In executing our functions as police officers, we have a duty to preserve law and order, detect and prevent crimes, apprehension of offenders, and then possibly prosecute them and enforce those laws, with which they are charged with. So basically, that is the mandate of the police. And in doing all this, we are very mindful of the rights of the individuals. You see, you cannot break the law to enforce the law. That is totally wrong, and that is unacceptable. So, in the police department, we have a unit called the Professional Standard and the Human Rights Unit, which is operating within the setup, to ensure that police officers carrying out their duties comply with international human rights standards and norms. And to add on to that, recently, and I want to take this opportunity to thank our able Inspector General of Police, Abdullah Sanya, for coming up with a directive, strengthening compliance into human rights and professional standards of the Gambia Police Force, in ensuring that all police officers comply with both national and international legal frameworks when it comes to protection and respecting of people's rights. So we have a big role to play, but in all these things we must not be complacent in executing our functions as police officers. So I will stop there for now, and then until we come back
absolutely, again. Yes, absolutely. Even though the whole concept of human rights will go back thousands of years, but some might say that perhaps it's been honored more in the breach than in the observance. I will go to the police PRO. So imagine a complaint about an abuse by the police. How do you investigate such, particularly when it comes to our human rights?
Very well. I think their office is responsible for that.
Yes.
Okay, I may comment that.
Just to give it a context, the Gambia Police Force as an institution, picking it up from where he stopped, we are responsible for protecting people's rights, but at the same time we have a function also, a constitutional mandate to enforce the laws. And in the enforcement of these laws, sometimes it's some kind of limits other rights that people enjoy. And so that also in doing that, we are conscious of the fact that there are procedures that have to be followed to ensure, even where somebody's freedom of movement, for example, is to be restricted, then it is done within the context of the law. This is to tell you, say for example, if you look at the Gambia Police Force operations recently, that is to say our policing in the new dispensation is quite different from our policing approach before, because this is why some people think, in fact, the way we enforce the law now is a bit weak. But that's not the case. The case is we are very aware of the fundamental human rights of people. We are also aware of the fact that when we enforce the law, it has to be in line with the fundamental human rights, protecting the fundamental human rights of people. And so that's why we are very meticulous in ensuring that even where we apply the law, it has to be applied in line or in accordance with the fundamental human rights of the people. For example, the issue about detention. It is 72 hours according to the law. Sometimes when you investigate cases and you have the obligation to ensure that because of the fact that that offense is a bailable offense, the person is entitled to bail within 72 hours. And then members of the public, especially people who are on the side of the other party, for example, they are the complainants. Sometimes they are not happy with this. We just took him to the police. Within 3 days, he has been let go. And that is because that person has a right as far as the law is concerned. Because the detention restricts his freedom of movement, which is, like the other people have said, this is a God-given right. So when we take it, it has to be in accordance with the law. So coming down to the investigation aspect of it, he's going to say something, but I just want to let you know that it comes to us in 2 ways. That is, when individuals violate each other's rights, the police investigate that. But also when a police officer is involved in the violation of an individual's right, we also have some duty to investigate our officers when they do this as well. So like, maybe you come back to me.
Before we go back to him, you said something very, very interesting.
Very well.
You said today the way you enforce is different from before.
Very well.
One wonders, why is it that the way you enforce today, you couldn't do it then? What are some of these factors that will influence your performance?
Very well. You know, we are in a democratic dispensation. And so when you are in a democratic dispensation, your policing approaches also have to be in line with democratic policing tenets. And so that calls for ensuring that you apply the law or enforce the law in accordance with the fundamental human rights of people, and also in accordance with the rule of law. And so that is to say, for example, presumption of innocence until proven guilty. That is, an accused person is innocent until the person is proven guilty. This is a concept that the police bear in mind, meaning that in the process of processing an individual, they have to go through all the legal remedies and all the legal tenets that they have to observe before they apply the law on this individual. His rights as far as an individual is concerned will all be observed. So, say for example, when we enforce the COVID-19 regulations, I see a lot of people said, you should do this, you should do that. Some people are even calling for us to use force in a lot of situations, knowing the fact that in a democratic dispensation, the use of force also has standard procedures as well. So we are very conscious of all these issues, which is why we are ensuring that our policing approaches in recent time are in line with democracy.
Thank you. Mr. Sar, about investigation.
Yes, so on that aspect, actually my office is the office that is responsible for receiving complaints of human rights violations by police officers against the general public. So usually when police are out there executing their functions, or even at the police stations doing their work, so there will come a time that people's rights will be violated, oftenly. People will be unlawfully arrested, some will be unlawfully detained, some will be tortured during the course of that arrest. You understand? So some of these things will reach to my office, and once we receive these complaints, we register the complaint. Once we register the complaint, we will hear from the victim, we will take his statement, and then after that, we will go around the statement and see who are the officers that are involved. Because our office, as it is an independent office, though theoretically it's part of the police force, but operationally it is regarded as an oversight body. One would wonder, how can the police police themselves? You understand? But in reality, this is what is happening. The police are not above the law. They are all subject to the law. So if you break the law, rest assured that the due process of the law will be followed, and then the perpetrator will be put to justice at the end of the day. So we have our procedures that we follow. We will call the people who witness the scene. You understand? Usually you will find challenges whereby the victim will have problem of producing a witness because at the scene it's only the police officers who are there. Probably there is no third party who is not a police officer, to come and support his or her own part of the story. But we have investigating skills which we use sometimes, to bring out the perpetrators from their hiding places and then follow the due process to make sure that the victim who deserves justice to be done is satisfied at the end of the day.
That's it.
Yes.
But just very shortly, that is the key, isn't it? When you have the police investigating the police, how can the people trust? What kind of mechanisms do you have in there so that people can trust your system?
Exactly. Like I have said, so we have a reporting line at the end of the day. So when we investigate and conclude our investigation, we will have to compile a report at the end of the day. So as far as my office is concerned, the reporting line of my office is we report to the Inspector General of Police directly. So we don't have to go through the bureaucratic processes, you know, for Inspector General to receive our report. So once we have an issue, his doors are open to us directly. We easily walk into his office and see him directly. In order to avoid delays here and there, this is why the office is being created in that manner, so that there is no delay when it comes to in terms of human rights issues. Quickly walk into his office, explain to him what you want, and then he will quickly grant that request that you have made to him. And aside of that, we also have human rights focal persons in the regions that are monitoring human rights violations across the country. So also the community policing unit of the Gambia Police Force, in their engagements with the public, also informs the public of the creation or the existence of this unit called the Professional Standard and the Human Rights Office of the Gambia Police Force, where the public are free at any time to come to that office and lay their complaints against any police officer, including myself, including him, probably I'll say even the Inspector General of Police himself, because he is a police officer. So even if you have a complaint against him, you are free to walk into our office and lay your complaint to us. We will genuinely investigate that matter. At the end of the day, we will come up with our recommendations, and we will follow up our recommendations at the end of the day.
And just to add on to what he said, even if the situation,
just quickly,
if the situation requires that the investigation is expanded, other institutions are also invited for the purpose of transparency to join in to investigate that particular case as long as the case demands that.
Like the National Human Rights Commission, the Ombudsman.
Yes. Thank you very much. In the interim, Mr. Abdul Bojang has left, and we've been joined by Mr. Esanjai from the Center for Policy Research and Development. Mr. Jai, welcome to the program. Yes, I'm quite interesting here. So your research. What can you tell us on your research and policy and development regarding human rights, for instance, human rights advocacy?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Mboyd, for having me. I think it's quite timely and interesting to have this program. At the level of the Center for Research and Policy Development, which is a civil society organization, we engage in research on policy and governance issues, of course, which includes human rights, issues relating to democracy, the rule of law, etc. We've been working in the past to engage different stakeholders in the country when it comes to the promotion of human rights and democracy, especially in an era where we are working to, consolidate our democratic gains after the change of government in 2016. Just like other speakers have said, I think we have seen tremendous strides in this country when it comes to, the promotion of human rights, just especially in relation to freedom of expression. When we say human rights, basically, we're talking about both first generational rights and second generational rights. And we talk about second generational rights, we are referring to economic and social rights, and of course cultural rights, which include the right to education, the right to health, the right to employment, the right to food, the right to development, etc. And when we talk about first generation rights, we are referring to civil and political rights. And these, of course, include the right to freedom of expression, the right to freedom of movement, freedom of association, etc. So mostly what we focus on has to do more with first generational rights, and these have to do with civil and political rights, because if you look at second generational rights, which include economic, social, and cultural rights, even if you look at international human rights instruments, basically they don't force states. They cannot compel states to make sure that these rights are implemented or fulfilled because of the economic disparity or situations of certain countries. So what they normally say is that they refer to this as progressive realization of these rights. But civil and political rights are rights that must be protected, promoted, and also fulfilled by states. So here is our focus mostly. Instead of focusing on advocating for the right for education, right to education, right to healthcare, because we know the economic situation of the country, and we tend to focus more on the civil and political rights, which are first generational rights, and they cannot be taken away. Also, part of our advocacy, of our work also has to do with protecting or promoting third generation rights. These third generation rights include group rights. For instance, the rights of vulnerable groups like women, children, the disabled or physically challenged persons. These are rights that we also try to work on to see that the duty bearers respect them. We are not all doing this to make sure that the Gambia is committed to these rights because they are protected by our constitution, but also it's part of efforts for the Gambia to fulfill its commitment to international human rights instruments, which includes, of course, the famous Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was, what came into force in 1948, talking about also the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights of 1966, also the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights of 1966, and also other regional and international or global human rights instruments, including, of course, the rights of the, of women, of children, etc. You mentioned them all of them. So we try to engage different stakeholders on this issue. But also we try to make sure that governments, the government is held accountable, especially when it comes to violation of rights. But more importantly, what we do is that we are more proactive rather than being reactive to situations, especially when it comes to right violation. I can give you an example of in last, I think it's this year specifically, 2-3 months ago or so, when the president said that when he wins in December, he's going to stop political activities here and there. At our level, the Center for Research and Policy Development, not many civil society did this. And in fact, what he said is that the Inspector General of Police will be consulted, that nobody should be given permit to carry out political activities. And we feel that here is a move because what we voted against in 2016, we don't want a repetition of that in 2021. And what we wanted was to make sure that we are proactive rather than being active to the situation. So it's kind of preventive diplomacy in peace building, sort of. So what we did was we issued a statement condemning that statement of the president to say, hey, these are rights that must be protected. Everybody has a right to freedom of association, freedom of assembly, freedom of expression, and they must be protected. They cannot be taken away. Just like Sabu said, nobody can boast of giving anybody civil and political rights because these are rights that are inherent. They are inviolable, they are indivisible, they cannot be taken away, especially related to right to life, the right to freedom of expression, right to property, right to freedom of movement. These are protected, and as a civil society organization, we make sure that the government is held accountable on these issues. But we also have partnership with different stakeholders, like I said, and even the security, of course, including the police, because we know that currently in the new dispensation, there is what we call the security sector reform. Of course, with challenges here and there, but this is a good move, and it's a move that was adopted by the new government when it came to power to make sure that members of the security are professionalized. Members of the security are instilled with that mindset, that professionalism in them, that they must be subjected to civilian control, management, accountability, and of course, in line with democratic principles, the rule of law as well. So these are areas that we are working on to make sure that rights are not only protected in this country, not only promoted, but also they are fulfilled.
That's it. We'll come back to you. But first, now the lines are open. Give me the number. 5050505. So if you for those with questions, forget we are watching now the Gambia Police for Civil Society Advocacy on Human Rights Program on QTV. So we invite our viewers to give us questions, to ask our gentlemen here, ask them questions. If you have any concerns regarding human rights advocacy and the police and civil society relationship, please call us to ask those questions. Maybe first I will go to Mr. Sarr. I wonder, how often do you find yourself having to punish a police officer for human rights violations? How many have been, I don't know, in the past year, how many have been prosecuted?
I won't say we have prosecuted so far anybody before the courts for human rights violations. When it comes to issues of human rights violations, investigation of human rights violations, these are complex matters, which need a great care, great delicacy, of how you go about them. sometimes it's time taking. Sometimes it may go up to a year, I will say. Investigations are ongoing, but you also have to bear with
just
us.
a moment, Mr. Sarah. There's a call coming in. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to the program. Please just give us your name and the question.
My name is Abubakar.
All right. And what's your question, sir?
I want to give you PRO.
Okay. Ask your question to the PRO.
Yeah, I love PRO. Yeah.
Please go on. Oh, we've lost that one. You were saying?
Yeah, coming back to my point. Investigations takes time. Sometimes we have challenges when it comes to the operation of our office. So you realize that some investigations require us moving from where we are seated, moving out to the scene. And you realize that we have challenges as an institution. So we're trying to grapple with those challenges in trying to make sure that we give out our best according to what is within our reach. But constraints are there, so some of those constraints hinder the progress of those investigations that are going on. So
thank you. We have another caller. Hello, caller.
Yes, hello, gentlemen.
Hello, good evening. Just give us your name and the question. Yes.
It's about if we really love our countries, why can't we rather sacrifice an individual for the common good of the people, general mass, than allowing one individual to dictate narratives? This is keeping Africa at bay. Is it wise to keep people failing promises that I will step by 3 years or 5 years?
No. Excuse me, sir. This is really not for that. This is really not for that. Sorry, we are not talking about that here. This is simply a police force and civil society discussion on human rights advocacy. We are not here for that.
Yeah. Very well, Mr. Boyd. I just want to add on to what Mr. Sarr is mentioning. Now, if you look at the human rights issues, especially regarding investigations within the police, there is also the police disciplinary code, which is not just the same as the laws that are the criminal laws in the courts. So if officers are found wanting or violating people's rights sometimes, if it goes in accordance with it violates the police disciplinary code, those officers are disciplined within the police force as far as the disciplinary code is concerned. They can be given punishment according to the disciplinary code, but this may not necessarily mean it's a criminal matter.
Okay,
but if
please,
it is a criminal matter,
we have another caller. Hello, caller.
Hello, Mr. Boyd.
Yes, please, very quickly, just give us your name and the question. Hello, we can hear you. Just give us your name and the question, please, sir.
Yes, Mr. Ture from SL.
All right, thank you. So what's your question?
I just want to thank the PRO for a job well done.
Thank you.
I've been advising to keep it up, and then people are just watching him over all the time over the TV.
Sir, do you have a question?
We recommend him.
I think he has a comment.
Thank you.
And then we are praying for him and then encourage him for a job well done.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Is that all? Sorry, we want to have as many callers as possible, really. So, really, if you have a genuine question, please, that's really what we're looking for. We want more clarity out there. Thank you very much.
Very well. So, like I was mentioning, sometimes the punishment is even internal. Let's say an investigation is conducted by their office and they found out that the officers have violated the professional standards of the police force in violating a particular person's right. Then that person is disciplined according to the police disciplinary code, which is also in accordance with the laws of the Gambia as well. So sometimes if it may not necessarily be a criminal prosecution in court, but action has been taken and those particular officers or officer has been punished in accordance with the police professional standards.
Thank you very much. Another caller. Hello, caller. Can you hear us?
Hello, good evening, Mr. Boyd.
Yes, good evening. So please.
My name is Sausi Jide, speaking from Bantam.
All right. Your question?
First of all, I want to thank the management of QTV for hosting such an important program.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
this is all what it takes. I believe the governance system has to empower the human rights, the guidance of human rights norms, just as the PRO rightly said, in the new dispensation, the police has a different approach for policing.
Very well.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay. All right.
So
thank you
I
very
believe
much.
the
Well
police
understood.
and the CSOs, the civil society organizations, have this rapport. They are always together. I believe the policing system is going to be holistically changed. The human rights of the people are going to be observed, and they are going to be protected and preserved.
Sorry.
Okay. Thank you very much. And before we get another caller, let me just come back to the president of PAC. Absolutely. The person there, the caller there mentioned something like a rapport between the civil society organizations and the police. How is the rapport like? What are some of the biggest challenges where you face in your civil society advocacy work?
Yeah. Thank you very much. In the civil society advocacy work, one of the biggest challenges we can talk about is the misconception of the public with regards to the work of the civil society. That is not something that started now. I think it is getting better now. But there was a period in this country, particularly in the last dispensation, was the civil society were painted as anti-government. Because the civil society always talk about what government does right and what government does wrong. Anything that the government does and it is not good, the civil society is always there to talk about it. Maybe even, I gave examples, condemning any action of the government or inaction of the government that is not in line with the protection of rights and freedoms of people. So this has been, that misconception has always been there, painting the civil society as bad people who are not, who does not like the country, the well-being of the people of the country. But the narrative has changed now, because people now understand, on the whole, these people are actually there for us, protecting us. And our relationship with the public now is beginning to have more confidence in the civil society that they can actually be there for us when we need them. And also our relationship with the police as well has also improved greatly, because I can remember in November 2020, myself, I was invited as a resource person when the police were training women on policing and democracy. And that was really very important. You see how the police are now are willing to work with the civil society in ensuring they do policing within democracy and do everything in accordance with the...
Just hold that thought. We've got another caller. Hello, caller.
Yes, hello, how are you?
Yes, fine, thank you.
I'm Yusuf, calling from Banjul.
All right, your question, sir.
What I want to ask is, like, as this pertains to some of the rights of individuals, I don't know what the policy is doing to, like, social media where rights are being, violated on daily basis. Because I don't think there is any life violation anywhere more than, what we see on social media on daily basis. And actually, this is polarizing our society. So I don't know what steps do they have instead, and what steps are they taking in order to, about this kind of benefiting our society. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. So this is a very interesting one. How do you police social media? That's essentially what the question is.
I think policing social media is the most difficult one because given the polarized nature of social media. But the Gambia Police Force, we also have our intelligence departments that are also monitoring views and comments and postings that are happening within the social media. And so what we do is we work with the existing criminal laws, and then we filter posts and comments that are either inciting violence. If it reaches the threshold of incitement of violence, you will see us here and there inviting people for questioning for certain comments or certain posts or certain deliberations they have made on social media. Or if it is some point where it reaches a certain criminal offense, in fact, we have even charge some individual for making certain deliberations on social media, and then we have prosecuted some individual. But I think also what is important as a challenge also is the laws, the existing laws. I think social media came recently at a time when the laws have not very well captured the issues and the emerging issues, and especially crime issues that are coming on social media, which is a challenge for the police as at now. So, but I hope that the legal luminaries are taking them on board, possibly when we get the appropriate laws that deals directly with issues that happen on social media. The policing will be much easier also for the Gambia Police Force.
Thank you. We'll just take a last call, and then I'll come back to you. Caller, do you have another caller?
Yes, hello, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Please, name and the question.
Hey, Mr. Danfa.
All right, what's your question?
Okay, my question is, you know, as far as you have human rights.
Yes.
Okay, and then most of the time, people are not told, they're not giving they're not giving out their responsibilities of how to behave towards, you know, respecting the laws, towards respecting the police, and in fact towards respecting each other, one another in the country. So that always creates a problem within our society. And in fact, you know, I mean, these human rights, how to call, I mean, watch how to call, I don't know, human rights, I mean, people in the country here, they have to specify and then talk to people that you don't have a right to just wake up and insult a person or just raise anyhow or talk anyhow you feel like against how to call, your fellow human being.
Caller, we understand your point perfectly well. Thank you very much, sir. I will put this to Mr. Sambo. I think earlier on I mentioned something like that. The emphasis on the responsibilities.
Yes.
I mean, sort of one gets the impression that there's just so much focus on these are our rights, these are our rights, these are our rights. But when it comes to responsibilities, maybe not as much focus. What do you think?
Yeah, that's very important, and that's why I mentioned that every right goes along with a responsibility. And the civil society organization is doing a lot around this area in terms of enlightening the people with what right goes with what responsibility. Depending on what civil society organization, we have so many civil society organizations that are playing different roles in ensuring we live in a very good society. There are some civil society organizations that focus on civic education that goes around the country, people doing community outreaches to ensure people are enlightened about their rights, but also understand the responsibilities attached to these rights. The civil society organizations are playing these roles, ensuring that the communities, the people are always enlightened. But in terms of the one who talk about social media, the civil society is playing an important role in that also, because I think his organization also on is fact check. Civil societies are playing important role in ensuring that people don't believe in everything that they see on social media, because it will be difficult for anybody to control what people put on social media, because you'll be in your bed and put whatever you want to put on the social media. So there are organizations that are always monitoring that to ensure public don't always believe in. And anything that is published on social media and it is not true, social media organizations, civil society organizations are quickly coming out to share, to do some fact checks and share some information to tell the people this is false. So
absolutely.
This is an important
yes.
thing.
Let me bring you here, Mr. Njai. You are the Center for Research, Policy and Development. From your data, what picture is portrayed about the state of human rights in this country and human rights advocacy in this country?
Well, not even only based on data or research evidence, but even anecdotal evidence shows that there is improvement when it comes to the respect of human rights in this country, especially in relation to civil and political rights. And like I said, this is mainly our focus. Obviously, there has been improvement. We have seen that. We have seen the new democratic dispensation. And of course, when it comes to even international bodies or Human Rights Watch, for instance, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, in fact, it's timely. Just today, Amnesty International issues a statement to call on the next government that is coming, whether it's going to be the continuity of this government or is going to be a new government. They're calling on the next government to ensure that respect for human rights is top on their priority. Even international human rights organizations in the past, during the former regime's era, I mean, they've always been alerting. If you read the human rights reports of both Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International, you know, there have been concerns raised. In fact, the Gambia not respecting its obligations to submit its reports on the human rights situation of the country. But of recent, we have seen improvement in that. And that is kudos to the Gambian people who came out in December 2016 to vote for the new government to ensure that democracy is in place and also their rights and freedoms are respected. But just to add on to, you know, there is a good collaboration between civil society organizations when it comes to this work, especially relating to promotion of human rights. At our level at CRPD, we also collaborate sometimes, you know, when other civil society organizations have activities, we engage with them. Like, for instance, I give example of Bekanyang. Bekanyang is a civil society organization that focus on human rights. It's from the Mandinka term, Bekanyang Tale, everybody is equal. So just 2 weeks ago, they held a cocktail session sort of where they invited musicians, you know, religious leaders, or of course members of the media and civil society other members of civil society organizations to talk about hate speech, because this is a problem. I think the caller asked that, and it's good that the police superintendent highlighted that. But also, like he said, I think the social media is coming new in the Gambia. People are getting used to it now, so the laws have not reflected it here and there. But then, so we're doing this when we engage, you know, religious leaders and musicians, because we know that these people have large followers. If you talk to somebody like Sanjay, who is only at the level of the CRPD, not many people follow him. When we issue statement, not many people read it. But when a musician is having large followers out there, a religious leader will preach and people listen to him. You know, journalists also have large followers. So we try to talk to them about hate speech, especially ahead of the December 4, 2021 presidential election, because we think social media played a positive role in the, you know, change of government in 2016. But also we should be cautious. Social media can play the opposite role.
Yeah, absolutely correct. I mean,
that is why we're engaging.
We've come to the end, the double-edged sword.
Yeah.
That is called social media. Thank you. We've really come to the end here. Thank you very much, PRO of the Gambia Police Force, Mr. Laminjai, and thank you very much, Mr. Ensasar,
thank you,
Assistant Superintendent of Police, and Mr. Bubakar Bojang. Bubakar Sambu, sorry. It was Abdul Bojang sitting there earlier on. Yes, Sambu of Peace Ambassadors Gambia Park, and of course from the Center for Research, Policy and Development, Mr. Sanjay. Thank you all very much. And viewers, thank you for watching us. As all respect human